On a somber summer day in 2011, the tranquil nation of Norway was forever changed by a series of tragic and horrific events that shocked not only Norwegians but also the entire world. The date was July 22, 2011, a day that would be marked by grief, horror, and loss as the country grappled with one of the most violent attacks in its modern history. On this day, a man named Anders Behring Breivik executed a meticulously planned dual attack, leaving a devastating impact on both the Norwegian people and the international community. Known for being a peaceful, progressive country with one of the lowest crime rates in the world, Norway was suddenly faced with the brutal reality of homegrown extremism and mass violence. In the years leading up to the attack, Anders Behring Breivik had grown increasingly entrenched in far-right, anti-immigration ideologies. He harbored a deep resentment toward the multicultural policies of Norway and believed that the country's openness to immigration, particularly from Muslim countries, was a threat to Norwegian identity. In Breivik's eyes, the ruling Labour Party was responsible for what he viewed as the Islamization of Europe, as it supported inclusive policies that encouraged diversity and cultural exchange. Rather than accepting these societal changes, Breivik's extremist beliefs led him to see violence as the only means of rescuing Norway from what he considered an existential threat. The Labour Party's youth organization, AUF, with its progressive young members, represented the future he sought to eliminate. For years, Breivik meticulously prepared for the attacks. He isolated himself, distancing from friends and family, as he became consumed with his violent ambitions. In the months before July 22nd, he rented a remote farm outside Oslo, where he began constructing a homemade bomb. He gathered fertilizers and chemicals, following detailed instructions to create a powerful explosive device. This farm served as a covert hideaway where he could work in secrecy and avoid detection by authorities. Throughout this process, Breivik documented his beliefs and motivations in a 1,500-page manifesto titled 2083, a European Declaration of Independence. In this document, he detailed his hatred for multiculturalism, his disdain for left-wing ideologies, and his desire to spark a nationalist uprising in Europe. Breivik's manifesto was a disturbing insight into his mind and the warped ideology that fueled his violent ambitions. On the afternoon of July 22, 2011, Breivik drove a white van filled with explosives to the heart of Oslo. He parked near the government quarter, specifically targeting a building that housed the offices of Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg. His intent was to deliver a catastrophic blow to the political infrastructure he believed was betraying Norway. At approximately 3:25 p.m., Breivik detonated the bomb, setting off a massive explosion that echoed throughout the city. The blast devastated nearby buildings, shattered windows, and sent debris flying across streets. In an instant, the peaceful heart of Oslo was transformed into a scene of chaos and destruction. The explosion killed 8 people and injured over 200 others, leaving survivors struggling for safety amidst the wreckage. Panic and confusion filled the city as emergency responders rushed to the scene, uncertain of the full scope of the attack. Many in Norway assumed they were under attack by an international terrorist organization. The media scrambled to report on the explosion, speculating about the possibility of further attacks. People in Oslo were terrified, fearing that the bombing was only the beginning. Amidst the chaos, Breivik was already driving toward his second target, Utoya Island. Utoya, a small island located about 40 kilometers from Oslo, was hosting the annual summer camp of the Labour Party's youth organization, AUF. This event brought together young people from across Norway, eager to learn about politics, discuss ideas, and bond with like-minded peers. The camp on Utoya had long been a symbol of hope, activism, and the future of Norway's social democracy. For Breivik, however, it represented everything he despised. To him, these young people were future leaders of a party he held responsible for what he saw as the degradation of Norwegian culture. Arriving at the ferry point near Utoya around 5 p.m., Breivik was dressed as a police officer, wearing a uniform and carrying fake identification to appear legitimate. He claimed to be a security officer sent to protect the island after the Oslo bombing, which allowed him to board the ferry to the island without arousing suspicion. Upon arriving, Breivik calmly walked around the island, scoping out the area and assessing the camp layout. However, as he reached the center of the island, he revealed his true intentions. Without warning, he pulled out an automatic weapon and began firing on the camp attendees. The first shots rang out, sparking terror and confusion among the teenagers and young adults. Many initially thought it was a drill or an isolated incident, but as Breivik continued his assault, the horrifying reality became clear. Desperation and panic swept across the island as campers scattered, searching for any hiding spot they could find. Some hid behind rocks, others took cover in buildings, and many, in a last resort, jumped into the cold waters surrounding Utoya, attempting to swim to safety. Breivik, however, was methodical and relentless. He moved across the island, firing indiscriminately at anyone in sight, targeting even those desperately trying to escape by swimming. Survivors later described the excruciating fear they felt as he hunted down his victims with a calculated lack of mercy. For over an hour, Breivik continued his massacre, shooting at defenseless teenagers and young adults, most of whom were no older than 20. Despite frantic calls for help from those on the island, Norwegian authorities faced logistical challenges in reaching Utoya quickly. By the time elite police units arrived at 6:34 p.m., Breivik had taken the lives of 69 people on the island, many of whom were just beginning their journey into adulthood. The aftermath on Utoya was horrifying, with survivors bearing physical and emotional scars that would haunt them for years. The scale of the violence stunned Norway. In total, Breivik had killed 77 people, injured hundreds, and left a nation in mourning. Norwegians, known for their close-knit society and trust in one another, were devastated by the realization that one of their own could carry out such a merciless act. The sorrow was immense as families, friends, and communities grieved the loss of so many young lives. Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg addressed the nation, urging unity and resilience in the face of such unfathomable hatred. In a powerful speech, he vowed that Norway's response would be more democracy, more openness, and more humanity. His words resonated with the Norwegian people, who came together to honor the victims, holding vigils, laying flowers, and lighting candles across the country. The people of Norway refused to let hatred define their response, standing united against the ideology that Breivik sought to impose. In 2012, Breivik faced trial, a process that was closely followed by media worldwide. During the trial, Breivik showed no remorse, openly admitting to his actions and justifying them as necessary to protect Norway and Europe from multiculturalism. He used the courtroom as a stage to promote his extremist views, which caused additional anguish for survivors and families of the victims. Ultimately, Breivik was sentenced to 21 years of preventive detention, the maximum sentence under Norwegian law, with the possibility of indefinite extensions if deemed a continued threat. This sentencing, while technically allowing for a release, meant that he could remain in prison for life if authorities deemed him dangerous. The trial and sentencing led to intense debate, both within Norway and internationally, about the adequacy of Norway's justice system. Some questioned whether a 21-year sentence, even with extensions, was sufficient for such a horrific crime. However, Norway remained steadfast in its commitment to its principles, defending its emphasis on rehabilitation over retribution and standing firm in its rejection of capital punishment. In the years following the attacks, Norway continued to grapple with the consequences of July 22nd. The events prompted soul-searching about how to address extremism and prevent future violence, leading to new security measures and efforts to counter radical ideologies. Yet Norway remained dedicated to maintaining its open, democratic values, unwilling to let fear compromise the principles of its society. Every year, Norway commemorates the victims of July 22nd, with memorials held to honor those lost on that tragic day. Survivors and their families continue to speak out, advocating for peace, tolerance, and understanding. The story of July 22nd is now part of Norway's collective memory, a painful reminder of the dangers of hatred and intolerance. Through resilience and unity, Norway transformed its response to this tragedy into a commitment to democracy, human rights, and the power of compassion in the face of darkness.